firstly, could someone at the back just wave if you can hear me? Otherwise, I'll do that, and that's no good to anybody. Thank you very much. Can we say a big thank you to everybody for coming? Very grateful for people turning out to be able to see what we can do together for the benefit of everybody in our community. So I, for one, am very grateful. One of the things I learned chairing meetings some time ago is knowing what time is home time. Can we all agree that at 9 o'clock we will have done, a number of our councillor colleagues have other meetings to go on to afterwards. So they must like meeting. I mean, we're very grateful to them. But we will finish firmly at 9 o'clock, and I'm hoping that we can make sure that everybody has time to express the ideas that they wish to do, and we'll go through that. So let's very briefly then how we would like, or it is proposed that we work together. Who am I? Very briefly, I'm John Latham. I've lived in Hampton North for 38 years. I'm the lay leader at Hampton Hill United Reformed Church, so I volunteer in Hampton and live in Hampton North and see many familiar faces that we've seen and worked with together. So thank you for everybody and to our councillors. The idea is that I should remain fairly independent and allow debate and discussion to go on. If this programme is being filmed, so that those folk who aren't able to be here can certainly hear and share in it, and I understand that will be available. In order for that to happen, there will be microphones brought around, and for those of us with hearing aids, I do guarantee that we will use microphones. So if some of you are blessed with really good voices, please realise we're using the mic for other people's rather than just for ourselves. I'd be grateful if you could do that. I guess everybody's signed in. It says on my notes I'm to ask to make sure that if you haven't signed in, please could you make sure that you will do that, and our details are all there. What we're going to do is we're going in a few moments to have a presentation about the whole question of the 20-mile-an-hour proposals, and Councillor Eamon's going to help us with those, and he's the Cabinet member with that responsibility. After that, there will be a time for questions, and the advice I've been given is to allow the presentation to take its course. Even though you will have burning questions, it's just possible that the presentation may cover some of the very issues that are of concern, and I do promise that there will be proper time for discussion. We will give that about 20 minutes because there are other important matters, and I will try and manage it in such a way, if we haven't had a chance to do all of that, we will come back to you, sir, for other matters, if that's okay. Thank you. Okay. We've had a number of pre-submitted questions, and you may well have seen them. I think they've been available, and our councillor colleagues have had a chance to see those, sorry. And what we will do is we'll try and give about 5 minutes to each of those. If you find that your view is being expressed by a previous speaker, please applaud or indicate in some way, rather than stand up and say it all over again. We're not trying to be that TV programme with the Dimbleby family. We're actually trying to have a discussion amongst people who live in the community to support one another. There will, when we've gone through the prepared questions, if I can manage it properly, be ample time for other questions. Again, for those of us who aren't quite as sharp in our hearing as we might be, if when you do come to ask your question, you could ask it slightly slower than you might speak ordinarily. There are two reasons for that. Firstly, it helps me understand it, and secondly, some of our councillors might want to take a note of exactly what you're asking and just give them a moment's thinking time. So we will do that. If there are prepared questions and a questioner is not in the room, then I'll just check that it is a question you all like to hear, and if, to be honest, it's not one that's pertinent to you, we will move on. The other detail, which will come as no great shock to you, is that we all live in either Hampton North or Hampton Hill, and this is a meeting for those wards. And luckily there are people from the borough who can tell me if we're asking about something which moves outside our community, that may be for another time and another place, but we're here tonight for the communities in which we live and work. I think really, according to what I've been asked to say, that really covers it. And the determination on my part is to make sure your ideas are heard clearly so that we can all work together one for another. To come back to where I started, I would like to finish at 9. I just realised I haven't turned the sound on my phone off. I just wonder whether the rest of you would be more efficient than me. So if we have, we'll just turn the sound off. Good. There we go. So thank you very much indeed. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Councillor, if you'd be kind enough, sir, to come and present us with this issue of the 20 mile an hour proposals and the consultation. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thanks, yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've turned my phone off as well because it seems the government are losing more votes every moment. I'm conscious of the fact that I don't want to keep getting tweeted. So, I'm going to rattle through this because I'm conscious that from the previous 7, this will be the 7th presentation I've done of 9, that we like, you know, the main focus is actually on the ability for you to be able to ask questions about what we're proposing to do. But I just want to cover off some of the main issues that have been picked up on in previous consultations through this presentation. So just as a starter, for those who aren't familiar, but I suspect those of you who turned up to this event are probably broadly familiar with our proposal, the idea is that we've put forward a suggestion that we'd like to see a 20 mile an hour speed limit applied to effectively all of the borough's roads. I don't know what I did there, but fair enough. With the exception of the 2 major TfL managed roads in the borough, which are the A316 and the A205. I guess what follows from that is a question about why. Why are we thinking of doing that? And there are 4 key reasons that I sort of like to sort of hang my hat on. Safety is the first and foremost, and I'll go into some more detail on that. But critically, the other alternative proposal that most often gets mooted is putting 20 mile an hour speed limit on only residential roads. And what you'll see from the boards at the back and from the data that we've produced during the course of this consultation is that actually a heavy bias in terms of the injuries, fatalities, and general accidents that occur on our road network actually take place on what we've described as the principal roads, not on those residential roads. So if we want to have a causal impact on reducing the accidents, injuries and fatalities on our road network, then the focus has to take in those roads too. Simplicity is the second point. One of the issues that occurs in a number of instances where 20 mph limits have proven less effective is where there's variation constantly within a borough or an area. People are unclear about what speed limits where, why, they don't really understand, and then don't observe those speed limits in quite the same way. So there's a simplicity about it. It's straightforward. It applies to all roads across the borough with the notable exceptions of those TfL roads. Although I should say that TfL are also committed to reducing the speed limits on all of their road network to 20 mile an hour over a longer time horizon themselves. Savings is the third point, and the critical factor here is, and this was new to me when I came to office and became cabinet member for this area, but when we discussed the proposals that we wanted to take forward as an administration, including this one, what came to my attention in discussions with officers was that to do what we're envisaging here, which is a blanket coverage of 20 mph, roughly costs about £700,000. To deliver a variable model based upon some sort of distinction between residential and principal roads is in excess of double the cost of that, about £1.5 million, because of variable signage and other factors. And lastly, it's more straightforward. That's not quite the same as simplicity, but it's more straightforward in the respect that wherever we had drawn an arbitrary distinction between road classes that were 20 and 30, it felt to me that we were likely to fall into the trap of an extended dialogue with residents who found themselves one side or the other of 30 or 20 on their own roads, where they said, well, actually, I'm on a 30 mile an hour speed limit road and I want to be 20, or I'm on a 20 mile an hour speed limit and I think it should be 30. And we could end up in this sort of never-ending dialogue, and therefore, through trying to address that, also end up with a patchwork quilt, which really, again, didn't add any great coherence to the 20 mph. So I'll rattle through this, but quick picture. We've done some preliminary work on what the road network looks like at the moment, what's going on our roads. So if we do go ahead with this proposal after the consultation, we've got a benchmark against which to be able to determine what impact has occurred from the change. The critical factor I'll just flag from these points here, and this presentation is available on the website, is that the survey data has highlighted that we have an average mean speed across the borough of about 21.9 miles per hour. Now that doesn't mean that our strategy is only to get everybody down 1.9 miles per hour, because of course the mean conceals a range of different speeds, but that's actually quite high. That's higher than most people would have expected. So we're not going particularly slow speeds in this borough, and I'll get on to, I think, a bit more detail on that, which relates shortly. This one again is not a slide which lends itself, probably for those at the back of the room, to too much analysis, but the critical factor I'd point out is that if you look at the trend in the last year alone for which we have data, which is the 16 to 17 data, in outer London boroughs we've seen a 2% reduction in casualties. In that same period, we've seen a 2% increase in this borough. So just trajectory-wise, in this borough, we're not keeping step with the rest of outer London, and we're travelling in the wrong direction in terms of casualties in this borough. Excuse me. No, I said I'd just like to finish. I'd like to finish this presentation first. They're not. Those figures up there are Transport for London figures.
Sorry, sir. What we thought might be useful, if you're happy, is to allow Councillor even to make the presentation.
Yeah.
I promise you there will be time, certainly to discuss figures and other matters, and these will all be in the public domain, sir.
Yeah, those figures are available.
Councillor finish, I think that's great.
Yeah, those figures.
Thank you, sir.
Those figures are available on our website, and they come from Transport for London, so they're accurate, sir. I'm telling you they're accurate. But let's move on. Look, we'll not get to the question and answer session unless we go through the presentation. So I think everybody probably wants to hear the various points, and then we can address those that haven't been addressed. So again, I won't dwell on this at any great length, but there is a lot of evidence out there about the financial impact of various different accidents, both from slight through to serious and fatalities. And there are pound, shilling and pence figures you can put against these. I mean, those don't take any account of the sort of human tragedy element of these at all, of course, but if you factor in the established figure of 22,300 for a slight classified accident, and you accept the figure is that we have 436 of those across this borough, and we aim for a 6% reduction, which I'll get onto, I think is an achievable reduction. It's a potential level of reduction that's deliverable through this change. If we get to a 6% reduction, therefore 26 fewer slight accidents alone from this change, that would yield a saving in excess of £579,000. Now, that isn't to the borough, that doesn't all come back to us as taxpayers, I concede, but that's a rounded societal impact figure in terms of the impact on emergency services and wider civil society. And as a result, the point I make here is that actually it doesn't take too much within the bounds of expectation to see the financial investment that we would make in this change realised very, very quickly in terms of its meaningful contribution to reducing the cost impact of slight classified accidents. And as I go on to say in the presentation here, even if we avoided one fatality in the borough as a result of this, that figure just dwarfs in financial terms the cost of deploying this initiative. That's about £1.8 million. Quick two slides on this, I'll do in quick turn because I think the second one's actually more illustrative. But this is a map of London, broken into London boroughs. And the darker the hue of green that you see here, basically the stronger the bias of the road network in that particular borough towards 20 mph. And indeed the really darkest green that you see in the sort of centralish area there, that's actually I think 90% or more. It's effectively the dominant road classification speed in those boroughs. Now to put it differently, this map shows you in green what's 20 mile an hour, individual roads. These are all individual roads on the entire network. The bluer roads that you see are 30 mph or higher. So I do this just by way of illustration to point out, and I say this slightly sort of in a saddened disposition, that in doing this, if we go ahead, we aren't going to be some sort of vanguard operation here. This is not groundbreaking new territory. This is actually a fairly established pattern of where a number of local authorities in London, but also more broadly in the country, are going. And I think it fits very well with the sort of trajectory, as I say, in relation to the Mayor of London's own transport aspirations as well in terms of reducing speeds and therefore injuries and fatalities on the network. I won't cover all of these point by point, but I think what the evidence here shows, and we're trying to be really transparent about the potential impacts of the change. Because I think what a lot of people will have thought when they see a consultation based upon a reduction of 30 to 20 is that our aspiration is a reduction of speed from everybody compliantly doing 30 to everybody compliantly doing 20. And that absolutely is the aspiration. But we know the reality of people's speeds is very different. And so what a number of other places that have implemented similar 20 mph limits have seen is between 1 to 2 mph average speed reductions. And I think to a number of you that may seem a pretty modest outcome, you know, to see overall reductions of speed come down only 1 or 2 miles per hour. But what I'd emphasise is the last bullet point on here, which is there is a very strong body of evidence which shows, because of the causal relationship between speed and the and the likelihood of an accident, the fact that you've got less time to respond, and that when you have that accident at speed, the higher your speed, the greater the severity of that accident. For every 1 mph reduction in speed that we get from a measure like this, you get, roughly speaking, a 5% reduction in accidents. And so that takes me back to the point I made earlier about a 6% reduction in slight, because actually if we got a 1 to 2 mile per hour reduction in this borough as a result of this policy, we're definitely in that sort of quantum. So we're looking at those sorts of levels of accident reduction that should come from this change, as a minimum. Critically, I'd highlight in this slide, there are a number of sort of supportive points here about effectively how 20 mph has been shown to lower the injury odds for cyclists, and how casualties were reduced in a similar proposal area such as the one we're doing, which is at Brighton, because Brighton implemented pretty much, broadly speaking, what we're suggesting here, a blanket 20 mph. A critical factor here is, of course, 20% chance of a pedestrian fatality, a 1 in 5 chance when you're hit at 30 miles an hour, compared to a 2.5% chance at 20. Now, I accept, given what I've said about 1 to 2 mile per hour reductions, that we're not necessarily looking at 30 versus 20. However, what you can see is the gradient of expectation that any of you, if you are unfortunate enough to be hit by a car, can have about walking away from that incident and its relation to speed. This again doesn't lend itself very easily to even probably the eagle-eyed in the front row, but there are some. There is a map at the back which shows the distribution of the collisions and accidents that we have in this borough. It was something that in the first couple of community conversations we heard loud and clear that people wanted to see. And what you'll see if you look at the maps that are at the back, or indeed online, you'll see again my point made earlier that in terms of our desire to improve road safety, there is a very heavy distribution of the types of accidents that we're referring to taking place on primary, on more arterial routes, and less so on the residential roads which we discussed. So that gives you, I mean, that's not particularly illuminating here again, but you will see a concentration if you look closely. There's actually more of these incidents that occur on the more major roads and indeed in the residential streets. Again, I rattle through this. If you want to look at it in a bit more detail, it's available on the website. This is particularly a slide which shows some of the other examples of 20 mph and the analysis that's been done afterward on what effect it's had. The particular example that I would cite would be the Bristol situation. Bristol did an extensive amount of work, more detailed than the figures that I raised earlier about cost implications of slight accidents and so on. But to summarise, Bristol have estimated the amount of casualties their move to 20 mph has generated, and they reckon it's in the region of £15 million. So, I mean, a very, very significant sum of money from the reduction in deaths, serious and slight injuries incurred on their road network. One thing on one of the sort of, I suppose, one of the banes of contention that does come up, one of the things that gets said to me and to others a lot of the time is, well, won't moving to 20 really slow me down? Won't it be tedious? Won't it cause all sorts of impacts on my day-to-day routine? And if those of you who are on social media will have seen today, the council put up a video which tracks a journey through the borough, going at 20 and 30 over a distance, I think from Hampton Hill from memory to Richmond. And the difference in time between arrival between 20 and 30 mile an hour being observed consistently through that drive is, I think, 3 minutes. It's roughly 3 minutes. More importantly, I think in data terms, if you look at TfL data about car journeys in London, 2/3 of all journeys in London are actually less than 5 kilometres. And not a third of those, but again, just taking a headline figure, a third of car journeys in London are actually less than 2 kilometres. So if you work out the difference of running at an absolute 20 versus absolute 30 from the moment you turned your car on to the moment you turned your car off, you're talking about a difference on the longer journeys, which are up to 5k, even if you accepted they were all 5k, which they're not. You're talking about a journey difference time of 3 minutes. So it equates back to the point in the video that we've got. And indeed, if you're 1/3 of those car journeys that are less than 2 kilometres, you're talking about a 1 minute difference in time. And that's with an absolute start to stop consistent speed of 20 versus 30. And as we all know in this borough, you'd be lucky to do 30 at many points in this borough. So actually, the difference between the two speeds is significantly reduced even within that. So I would say to residents concerned about the impact they will have on their journey times, in the vast majority of cases, I don't think that residents will notice any material difference at all. And indeed, there are some arguments that congestion is significantly eased, flows significantly eased as a result of 20 mph. So what's our realistic expectation? I won't dwell on this, but it comes back to my earlier point. We do want to see compliance with whatever speed limit we have in force, but we're realistic in the fact that any reduction in speed as a result of this measure has a clear causal relationship with an improvement in road safety. So from our perspective, simply bringing road speeds down closer to 20 mph would be an achievement. So we're not going into this all idealistic and sort of misty-eyed, imagining that the objective is to get everybody universally compliant with the new 20 mph. We know that not everybody is universally compliant with the existing 30 mph. But it is about reducing speeds. And there's a lot of psychological data to support it as well, which is to say, those of us that do exceed 30 at the moment, do so within a sort of tolerance bound that they feel is right, and different people have different tolerances. If the limit is 20, people are unlikely, who were comfortable doing, for the sake of argument, 36 in a 30, they're unlikely to feel comfortable doing 36 in a 20-mile-an-hour zone. They may still exceed that speed, but they won't exceed it to the level that they would have done in 30. So you have that, there's quite a strong body of psychological evidence that shows there is a reduction in speed possible from these types of measures. A couple of slides left. One on air quality. People have raised concerns about what impact this has on air quality. I've got air quality in my title. I'm a cabinet member for transport, street scene and air quality. So I can tell you hand on heart, as an administration and as an individual cabinet member committed to improving air quality in the borough, I would not be proposing any measure that I thought or knew would have a negative impact on air quality. And the reason I feel confident about it is there's an awful lot of evidence out there that shows, for example, on reductions in speed, you get a substantive reduction in NOx. PM 2.5 and PM 10, which are fine particulate matters that come particularly from tyres and from brakes, they clearly reduce because as you travel at a lower speed, the amount of energy you inject into braking and tyre resistance is less. So there's an absolute relationship between speed and a production of PM 2.5 and PM 10. And critically, I say the most significant factor in my confidence, our confidence as an administration, that this won't just not have a negative consequence on air quality, that will improve air quality, is a number of places that have implemented this have shown that it encourages and supports modal shift, which is kind of posh terms for people getting out of cars and getting out cycling, getting out walking. And for every person that takes that 2-kilometre journey by bicycle, and of course not everybody can, but for any person that takes that 2-kilometre journey by bicycle or by walking or by public transport, you've instantly taken a car off the road, you've eased congestion and you've reduced pollution. So there is a causal relationship between that shift in transport mode and air quality. And that comes from making the urban environment, the road network around us, less hostile. There's a lot of data out there, but I mean, I point you to the Edinburgh study where they went to 20 mph and they saw a 3-fold increase in cycling to schools that was supported by this measure. And I hear a lot from cyclists, particularly people who aren't cyclists at the moment or are infrequent cyclists, about the hostility of the road network, and about the fact that actually if we make that environment less hostile and less perception of a high-risk environment, that they may be more inclined to get out there. And if it comes up in question, very happy to talk at more length about that. One quick one here, because it may come up in the questions. Some people have raised it didn't work in Bath and North East Somerset. It's sort of the most typically trotted out example of 20 mph is doomed to failure. Critically, is comparing apples with pears. Bath implemented 20 mph zones, which is about physical infrastructure. It was specifically in some areas. It wasn't a blanket imposition. And as a result, what they found was an increase in some accidents, because actually some of the issues related to the variable speed limits that were in existence across their area, and about some of the engineering measures that they deployed. And I hate to say it, but it was a very party politically divided issue in Bath between Liberal Democrats who are in favour of it and Conservatives who are against it, and as a result it's been used as a sort of weaponised form of political debate. I'm hoping very much that that's not the case here, and I'm very pleased to see that all parties indeed are supporting this principle in the borough. So that's it. I am not claiming to cover off everything, but I wanted to give a broad run through of some of the issues that have been raised in previous sessions, and then turn it over to you for questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. Do we wish to give a round of applause? Thank you. The way I'd like to do this, if I may, is to invite comments and questions from the floor, but it may well be that some of your questions or comments are so focused on our two wards that our ward councillors may wish to make a contribution. Three wards even. You can tell I was an English teacher, not a maths teacher. So if I could just momentarily, because you may not be able to see councillors' names here, firstly, thank you to you guys for all the time you give for our community, and be prepared to try and represent all our different opinions. I wish you joy. Councillor Avery Aquelo, and then Councillor Jeffrey Samuel, Councillor Kate Howard, Councillor Geraint Thomason, Councillor Gareth Roberts, our leader, I think, is that right? Indeed, yes. Councillor Jonathan Cardy, Councillor Monica Sanders, and Councillor Matthew Hull are also with us. So we're grateful to them. But if they do wish to contribute, because some of the questions about this limit will affect the streets we live on, then you may well feel that you need to interject. You will indicate to me if that's right. Is that okay? Right, now we're going to have a bit of fun, I hope. Does anybody wish to say anything? Right, can we take the two gentlemen over here, first at the front, and then second there, and then the third at the back? Would that get us started? If you'd be kind enough to give us your name, sir, that would help. Thank you.
It's Colin Keats, and I live on Uxbridge Road. We have spoken for this at some length, and I find what you're actually saying, for people who've not looked into this in detail themselves, would probably be very confusing. Lots of little figures and things, which are, I think, supporting... At
the risk of being, could you speak into the ice cream cone?
Okay. Is that all right?
That's
okay,
fine.
Sorry.
I think that's better for people who
right. Yes, it can be confusing to people who don't know, and it's a very upbeat presentation, but it's not the facts. Transport for London is one thing, but the Department of Transport has done a 4-year-long study is rather different. Yeah. So let's just take the pure basics. As I found out, there was an article in the Times last Friday week, which was extremely good. The person who's doing it, the journalist, was not putting over his point of view, he's putting through the basic facts from the big documents, which I have been through. So quite simply it's this. Let's take the first one, which we can throw out, but we'll take the first one. It is a fact. Drop from 30 miles an hour actual driving to 20 miles actual driving will increase pollution by 50%. He's nodding his head. Unlike him, I have done experiments over 7 years on this. He's done none. Right. It's not so important because...
Well, can I take them in turn? Because if you're going to ask multiple questions,
no,
it's going to be...
over a point to people.
But it's quite difficult to respond to the points.
Would it be okay, sir, if we take two comments and then I come back to you? Would that be all right, sir? In the same way as we did with the floor.
It doesn't say where you shouldn't try to... Yeah.
What we'll try and do, if it's okay, is allow 2 people to make their comments and then Councillor Eamon to respond and other councillors too. And then I think we'll develop a debate rather than a number of us cutting it. And I will try not to cut across as well. But if you'd like to finish, sir,
yes,
and again, at the risk of being dull.
All right,
thank you.
Just as there were 4 points in it. The actual speed, as we know, so 21.9 is 20.9 under the national reports. There are no less accidents, not minute. Less casualties, minute. So those are not really the thing. The thing is that £700,000 being spent to introduce this. And how are they going to introduce it? Because I think everybody should know the actual legal norm for urban areas or anywhere with street lightings is 30 and remains at 30 miles an hour. But in 2016, the government gave more power to local authorities to introduce 20 miles an hour, but they have to place those signs on every single road where there's 20 miles an hour to show it's not 30, every single one, and maintain it. Now, I wonder how, and this is the important one for everybody here, not just where I live, where the Royal Mail vans go up the road every night at around 35 to 45 miles an hour. How would it be policed? How will you police the cyclists who, in a light road, will be travelling more than 20 miles an hour themselves? So as a cyclist,
I promise we will take 2, sir. Is there a third point you wish to make, sir? Or
well, can I be allowed to address them, and then we can, if there are more, I'm very happy to take them, but I'm just conscious that my lexiconic memory will not extend to 5, 6, 7 different...
come back when the right people might like to speak.
Let me address your first one, which is about air quality. I directly and I stubbornly refute your point, absolutely. There is no evidence whatsoever, and my microphone doesn't seem to be working particularly well, but okay. There is no evidence that there's a 50% increase in pollution, and indeed, as I pointed out at previous sessions, I have spoken to 2 leading... Sorry, let me finish. Please allow me to finish. You asked your question, let me answer.
You're not
allow me to answer. Please allow me to answer.
There is no increase if the speed remains around 20.
Please allow me to answer the question on air quality. I've asked 2 leading air quality experts, one from King's College and one from the University of West of England. They're both leading institutions for air quality. I asked them what impact, and this was before we consulted, so I was interested, what impact will 20 mph have on air quality? Both of them said, and I paraphrase, they both said no negative impact at all, and they said it has the potential to improve air quality. So I completely refute your point on air quality. Those are homebrew figures that have no evidential basis, and the figures I presented here have a much wider acceptance amongst the academic and government community. I'm sorry.
So can you just agree that you've never done any tests personally?
No, I have personally not homebrewed any statistics in this document, no.
But the pollution is based on the fact that you're not reducing people driving at 30 to 20.
Forgive me, pollution is generated by multiple forms of air quality impacts, of which I cited a number. PM 2.5 and PM 10, you're making no account of at all.
I'll take account of it then. So because we're always driving at 20, that won't be any difference.
Well, how will it not be any different? You're saying
because you're still driving at 20. You said we're driving at 21.9.
No, but if you're at a lower speed than you would otherwise have been, the amount of brake impact that you need to reduce your speed at lights and junctions is less. The amount of tyre wear associated with movement is less. Therefore, there is less particulate.
If you're driving at 30.
If you're driving at 20, there's less. It's
no.
Look, sir, we're going to.
Yes,
I think what we're going to do.
20.
I'm going to be naughty here, I'm afraid. It's not a surprise that some of us disagree in certain areas. At this point, I think that is a useful discussion. Did you wish to say?
Could I just come back on the?
Let me just allow you, and then we will move on if you don't mind.
The Department for Transport point, which I think is another substantive point you raised. So, the Department for Transport study, which recently came out, I'm more than aware of. The Department, and indeed the Times reporting of such, the Times has had a consistent attitude over a sustained period of time of being anti-20 mph, so I don't accept their editorial independence on this at all. But if you look at the DFT report as I have, the DFT report determines that actually, and I think it's a terribly wasteful exercise, they spent millions of pounds on Atkins to do an exercise ascertaining whether 20 mph works. And what they found is all the evidence that they'd managed to gather from the local authorities that implemented it was not enough evidence to be able to reach a determination. They did not say it didn't work. They didn't say it did work. they didn't know. What they did say, and I'll cite you a couple of examples very quickly, I think it was something like 80% of people in places where 20 mph was implemented wanted to keep it. Similarly, they did say in the document, I can't cite the specific words, but Brighton, which I cited, which are doing exactly what we propose to do here, which is a 20-mile-an-hour limit across all roads, so I think a very significant reduction in accidents, injuries and fatalities. So actually, there are pockets of data in there, if you were willing to look in enough detail, that show that 20 mph works very well. And the DFT accepted that, where it's supported, which is why we're consulting.
Sir, I promise I will come. Just to finish off, because we must be careful.
Brighton is put down there, it's an exception amongst all the cities in the country.
Thank you very much.
Can
Can we move on to the gentleman in the pullover, please? Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your response. Oh, councillors, did you want to enter into that at this point? Thank you very much. Well done. Thank you, yeah. Sir, if you give your name, please, and ask your question, that'd be lovely.
My name's Simon Goddard. Can we go back to slide 5, which is the reason for the statistical reason for doing this?
Yeah.
First of all,
would you be kind enough to colleagues at the back if you treat it as an ice cream cone?
Okay.
Sir. I know
Is that better?
I feel like you're on the telly, but you do need to. Thank you.
okay, the figures that you got there, the percentages for staff are in the wrong columns.
No.
The 12.7 and the 14.2
They're not.
have been transposed.
No, these are two separate. I think before you go down this route, what the figures in these two tables are is they're distinct from the statement I make below. These these show Richmond roads versus TfL roads. They're not the figures that support the figure where I talked about a 2% reduction in casualties over the same period. There was a 2% increase.
No, the 12.7 and the 14.2 apply to the wrong columns. You've got them transposed. It should be 14.2 on the left, 12.7 on the right.
If there's a mistake there, I apologise on behalf of myself and the officers.
Yes.
So we'll double check that for the next section.
The TfL figures that you quote here, you say that on the bottom line, in Richmond over the same period there was a 2% increase. But if you go back to the TfL report, it actually shows there's a 7% drop. And if you go back to the earlier years, you find that Richmond is actually better than the rest of Outer London.
Well, share with me the data after this event. I'll look at it. I've looked at the data with officers. I've been led by officers on this. I haven't gone out personally and found the figures. Officers who are the independent arbiters of this council who are trying to find the right... The point is, I need to review that with officers. I can't give you an answer, having been presented with a piece of paper here now. It will dominate the time. No, it's not reasonable for the rest of the people's questions. Share it with me at the end of the session, sir.
It's here.
What the council said, he'd be very grateful. He'd be grateful if you could have those, share those with him afterwards.
Can I make the point? I made the point. These are TfL figures. The TfL figures show, in relation to casualties, which is what I've cited, that we are moving in the wrong direction, whilst Outer London is moving in the right direction.
And I'm saying
if you can show me otherwise, I'm very happy to reflect on that and come back to you.
Councillor, may I just request, you can also reflect that we the team are the reason why I'm here.
Okay, we'll get you a microphone, sir, and I will bring it. There are 3 others, and we'll have a microphone. There was a lady at the back we agreed was number 3, and I think there was a gentleman over there, number 4. You, sir, at the back, number 5, and you come in at number 6. Okay, thank you.
Hello, Sarah Burley. I live on Hanworth Road. I've been doing a little bit of experimentation with this 20 mile an hour myself. I drive a truck around the borough. I drive almost entirely within the borough of Richmond, and I'm unable to drive a vehicle that is smaller than a 2-litre diesel truck. Well, I'd love to have an electric one. I can't. Not yet. I need to be a bit more successful in my business, perhaps. But I have been testing driving at 20 miles an hour, or as for all of the journeys that I do, and I have discovered that I can't actually get my vehicle out of second gear. The one thing that I would like to know is, in driving in second gear consistently, am I going to be creating a worse problem? I live on a road with 3 schools. Am I creating a worse problem by doing so?
The answer is, and it's a very useful question. The answer answer is all of the evidence in the places that have implemented 20 mph and from the academic community says absolutely no. Because the reality, no, forgive me, let me finish. Because the reality is, I suspect, even if you've got a 30 mile an hour speed limit, there are a significant portion of time that you're in second gear in this borough anyway, because there's a significant amount of congestion in this borough. So the like-for-like comparison is not a steady run rate speed of 20 mph versus a steady run rate speed of 30. It's the realities of driving on our roads. And the NO2 figures have been proven on lower speeds to come down. As I point out, air quality is contributed to by multiple factors: NO2, CO2, and PM2.5 and PM10. PM2.5, PM10 come down, and as I've said, leading academics in this field say it has a positive impact, and primarily driven by modal shift, because if there are fewer people on the roads in their cars, then there's fewer people causing pollution on our roads.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Sarah, or is that... Okay, there was a gentleman there. No, okay, could we have the gentleman towards the back with the glasses? That's the gentleman, yes, sir, thank you.
It's a slight adjunct to what Sarah's just said, and that is that the sweat volume of a car at 20 miles an hour in second gear is probably about 2/3 of that in 30 miles an hour in top. And unless you've got a car with some magic formula going on under the bonnet, you can't get out of second or third gear. So therefore, your sweat volume during the period of the journey is bound to be more. And any academic on the planet can tell you that it's not. It's actually physically impossible for it to be less.
So I understand all of these personal observations. I do. Look, I accept those as personal observations. What I would say,
they don't make any difference.
No, but what I'd say to you is this: every area that's implemented 20 mph has either seen a reduction or no negative impact at all on air quality. There's not a single area that has seen a deleterious impact on air quality as a result of introducing 20 mph. The DFT study that was cited didn't find any relationship between 20 and any negative consequence on air quality. So look, I can accept your personal observations take you to a sort of view on what might be the real world consequence for you in an individual car, but the aggregate has to be considered: the impact on modal shift, the fact that not everyone is driving a diesel vehicle, the fact that a number of more modern cars can deal with slower speeds, and the fact is air quality improves under 20 mph, it doesn't worsen.
But they can't get out of second gear.
But not all vehicles are a diesel, and indeed diesel
engine is exactly the same. You've got
diesel,
the gearbox in your car.
actually, a number of modern cars, particularly smaller cars, are quite capable of doing 20 miles an hour in third gear, if we want to dwell on the fact. So look, the point is, I'm being led by the evidence rather than the anecdote, and the evidence shows air quality improvement, not air
Well,
quality.
I have to say, it's starting to sound like £350 million for the NHS on the side of it.
Well, I didn't make statements like that.
There's somebody with a baseball cap who indicated indicated they want to speak. Is that the person still wish to speak? That's the person. Thank you.
My name is Amber Debenham. I noticed that nobody's mentioned anything about the emergency services being exempt, if not the response times affect the transfer of critical patients, and also patient transport and the mental health services that come out and do outreach work in the local area. Medical professionals, they get paid an hour per hour. How is this going to affect how many patients they can see per day and how many people they can help?
Okay, I'll answer that. So, as I pointed out, in terms of typical journey times moving around this borough, actually there's no material impact. You're talking about 1 to 2 to 3 minute changes in distance travel. In relation to your point made about emergency services, this is a complete red herring, I'm sorry to say. Emergency services have the ability to cut round and break speed limits when they have to attend an emergency incident. There's no material difference whatsoever that comes from this, and indeed there's no evidence, going back to the DFT report or any wider studies, that show any negative impact whatsoever from areas that have implemented 20 mph on emergency services or on wider social service delivery.
The gentleman with the beard and the glasses just here, thank you. Yes, you, sir. The gentleman standing up, the microphone's coming to you, thank you.
Thank you very much. A well-written...
Your name, if you'd be so kind, sir.
Sorry, Graham Nielsen,
Thank you.
Wensleydale Road. A well-written leaflet that got put through our doors, but I found a little confusing. If I may be allowed to comment, and then perhaps the council come back after.
Can I ask whose leaflet it was? Can I ask whose leaflet it was?
The one about 20 miles an hour.
Yeah, but who's it from, sir? Sorry. Is it from the council?
I thought so.
Okay, I'm just checking. Right.
Firstly, speeds. Much of the data talks about the improvement in fatal and serious injuries when speed is reduced from 30 to 20, as per the display at the back. But the data, the one we've been looking at earlier, shows average mean speeds across the borough of already 21.9 miles an hour. Data also shows a third of all areas, the average mean speeds are over 24 miles an hour. Therefore, 2/3 of the borough is below 21.9. So why is 20 miles an hour in 2/3 of the borough required? Can I please finish this?
Sorry.
Sorry, the council have had 20 minutes on it. I do apologise.
I'm trying to answer the questions, that's all.
I suspect also that this speed reduction will cause frustration and drivers hitting the pedal when they get to the 316 and other TfL roads. So let's talk about accidents. 32% reduction when average speeds drop from 31 to 19. That's on the display board at the back. But average speed is already 21.9 and much lower in 2/3 of the borough.
Okay.
Average speeds of 31 don't exist in Richmond except on the TfL roads. Now, we're told there were 7 fatalities in the last 5 years. That was on one of the slides. But data shows only 3 in the last 3 years. Therefore, that means there were 4 fatalities in the previous 2 years. So we're actually improving in Richmond. 2014 and 13, there were 4 fatalities. That's more than in any 2 of the past years.
But then 15 was 0,
Thank you.
so 16 was
If I
1,
may go on
17 was 2.
to the emissions, to aid the council's wider aim to improve air quality, we've just been talking about this, it's on the website and documents. Health document that's on the website indicates that to reduce speeds to 20 miles an hour does not increase emissions. Okay? But it can't guarantee any improvement. It just says it might do. Now, buses cut engines when stopped, and car drivers are encouraged to stop engines at traffic lights or in traffic jams. Probably the reason for that. This proposal will increase journey times. The display is misleading. We've got mixed units, miles per hour, with kilometres, short journeys. A journey across the borough taking 3/4 of an hour, 30 miles an hour, would take an hour at 20 miles an hour. That's just the maths of it.
At the risk of being rude,
cars do that-
sir, would it be okay if we let the councillor pick up some of the issues you've raised?
I'm going to listen.
That's lovely. Just finish off your last 2 sentences. That would be kind, sir.
So if 4 cars do that, that's another hour's worth of engine running, multiplied across the borough by thousands of car journeys, a lot of extra fuels. Can I just finish by making comment on costs? Because it takes longer for drivers to go around the borough, there's a greater cost to delivery drivers and shops. But also, in terms of the cost of putting this into practice, we're told that both internal budgets and third-party funding sources, such as TfL, if they get it, would be used. Well, as far as I'm concerned, one, there's no guarantee that we'll get grants. We're told that we won't be paying for it, but budgets are already stretched. I would feel that schools, library and care for the elderly are far more important than reducing speeds that are already 21.9.
Councillor, would you just give the microphone to the gentleman immediately in front of the gentleman with the beard? Did you wish to contribute, sir, or have you changed your mind? Yes, you did wave earlier. In a moment to you, sir. Councillor, you might want to pick up some of those points.
Because there were so many points, it's difficult for me to recall them all and address them all. And I'm very happy to talk afterwards if I miss any of them. So let me start with the money, which was the last point you made. So the money we already have. We have it from Transport for London. It's from the local implementation plan funding that we get. It has to meet the Mayor's priorities in relation to improving road safety. So as much as I agree with your broad thrust, which is that a number of our local services are really stretched, and I would like to see more money spent on schools and health services and so on, we can't use the money for that. It's impossible for us to use this sum of money for that purpose. I can't also use it for filling in potholes, as been suggested. I can't use it for anything other than road safety measures. And £700,000 in terms of individual road engineering measures doesn't deliver very much. So in terms of bang for buck, it's absolutely clear to me that this sum of money generates a much better road safety outcome than any other spending of the money. So that's my answer to your money, sir. Let me get through the other points, please. Forgive me. No, forgive me. The lit money will pay for this. So that's that. On average speeds, you mentioned 21.9 mph average speed. It's a mean figure. It takes in a whole multitude of different speeds above and below that in order to generate that single figure. And those figures vary wildly depending on times of day, depending on the roads concerned, depending on whether they're the residential roads or the main arterial roads. So to suggest that because we got 21.9 we haven't got a problem, frankly, I think is a mistake. The average speeds driven by the same analysis across London, I think, is roughly 16.9 mph. So actually it's high. It's a high speed. It's a high speed, and 1 to 2 mile per hour reductions across that will result in fewer injuries, fatalities, and accidents as a general rule. Can you just shout out any other specific points you wanted me to address? Because honestly, there were so many in there. It's very difficult for me to recall what you started talking about at the beginning versus what was at the end of your intervention.
One comment was doing a journey that takes 3 quarters of an hour across the park.
Okay. Look, I remember the point. Look, the point is, I'm being driven by data again. 1/3, no, forgive me, sir. 1/3 of all London journeys by car are less than 2 kilometres. And you talked about misleading figures. I've converted the 2 kilometres into miles per hour so that we've got the accurate figures here. And the point is that journey, that 2k journey, is 1 minute longer as a result of this change. If you travelled at a stop-to-start speed of 30 versus 20, and that is not the reality. And actually, 2/3 of journeys are less than 5 kilometres. You're talking about a maximum 3-minute differential on your journey time. These are not the wild types of assertions that you're making in terms of increased journey time. So, and the other point I'd make is, from my perspective, and look, I'm a fierce proponent of this, right? Is that 3 minutes on my journey in a car, because I'm a car driver too. 3 minutes on my journey, if it increases the chances of me being able to avert an accident, and if it means that if I hit somebody, that person is likely to get up from the road, I'll take the 3 minutes.
Okay. Gentleman here, sir. If you'd be kind enough to give your name, sir. Sorry.
My name's Jonathan Ward. Just to move slides. We could go back to the one the gentleman was talking about, just very quickly. It's just
Which slide?
The one, number 5, I think it was, from memory.
Yeah. I've not had this degree of introspection on my slides. I'm keen to see the interest.
Right, well, just a quick factual thing.
Yeah.
You know, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but I think all they're doing there is, for that first one, for example, in 2017 it says 385 total, 215, 337. To work out that percentage, it's take one from the other and divide by 337, that comes to 14.2. On the other side, it's exactly the same sort of calculation, it's 12.7.
Yeah.
So, just for factually, unless I'm very much mistaken, those two figures are transposed.
Well, you know what? Thank you for that, because actually it means that it's a worse picture on our roads than it is on TfL roads. So
Well,
thank
that's
you
what it
for
says
bringing it to my
underneath,
attention.
actually, and it's a 1.5% difference if it's subtracting one from the other.
But it's still an increase. It's still
yeah, no,
a 50%
absolutely.
increase.
I'm not really, I'm just pointing out that they are back to front.
Yeah, no.
Just one quick question then. Times, 30 minutes. How long does it take to get to Kingston from here? 30 minutes-ish?
Depends what time of day you go, right?
Well, okay. Don't forget, actually, one interesting point. There's a 40-mile-an-hour limit in the last bit to Kingston. No houses, no nothing, much.
Yeah.
Totally segregated cycle track. The proposal there is to halve the speed limit.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, if it takes 30 minutes, what does that change to if that's at 30 miles an hour to 20?
Well, it depends on the length of road that you're travelling over, doesn't it? To be able
No,
to
if it takes 30 minutes, no, it doesn't, sorry.
No. Look, I'm not going what I'm saying to you is, if you turn a 40-mile-an-hour stretch of road into 20, then it depends on the length of road that you travel along at 20 as opposed to 40.
Yes, no, so sorry, I'll rephrase the question just quickly. If it's 30 miles an hour, and it's a 30-minute journey, and you change it to 20, what does that change the time to?
I honestly couldn't tell you because you're throwing.
Okay.
I'd have to look at the distance. And we'd have to estimate.
No, I'll tell you, it's 45 minutes. It's very simple mathematical calculation.
Well, no, forgive me. So what you're doing is you're doing exactly what I've done in terms of worst case estimate, which is a full run speed along the full journey of 30 versus 20, which, as we all know, is not the reality of a journey time at all. Most of the time, we are very lucky when we're driving in this borough to get anywhere near to 30. So the differential is much more modest.
What I'm going to do now is allow for another 4 colleagues who've asked to speak, and then I think a number of you have raised other matters, and I'm going to try and raise those so that we can come back to those. But there are 4 colleagues who've already indicated, and there's a gentleman with a white shirt and glasses. I think you may have a moustache, sir. Have I identified you correctly? Thank you.
My name is Skinner. I live in the Hamworth Road. You identified yourself as being a driver.
Amongst other things, yes.
Yeah. Have you made a modal leap yet?
I drive a motorcycle, I drive a car, I drive a bicycle, but I primarily use public transport and walk.
Right, but you're still driving a petrol...
No, I converted recently. We must analyse my own personal usage. I recently moved from a diesel vehicle to a petrol vehicle, and I have 3 children under 3, so I use that vehicle with my wife to take them when we leave London, not for journeys in
Excluding the constant between petrol or a diesel-driven car and an electric car, in other words, the particulates on braking and tyres, because they both have both.
Yeah.
Are you telling me that if you drive all day long in 3rd gear, you use no more fuel and you make no more fuel discharges than if you drive in top gear?
I'm going to tell you this. So, the direct comparison of most people who are critics of this proposal... I'm going to answer your question. Forgive me, I am very quickly going to answer your question. Just allow me more than 1 or 2 sentences. Most people who criticise this on air quality say because of the comparison between 30 versus 20 is a static speed, it means that you're in a lower gear at 20 and therefore you're polluting more harmfully. The reality is actually when you have a 20 mph speed limit, you actually have reduced differentials between the static speeds and the running speeds. So you have less deceleration, you have less braking, forget the particulates, let me finish. Forget the particulates, but you also have less acceleration going on. And actually, one of the most major impacts on air quality in relation to engine emissions is the acceleration, not the static speed.
Right.
And we have a higher acceleration point to reach at 30 than you do at 20. So the comparison simply between static run speeds is an unfair comparison.
I'm not talking about the particulates from braking.
I'm not talking about particulates. I'm talking about tailpipe emissions. Tailpipe emissions are increased from greater levels of acceleration. But I'm answering your question, sir. I'm directly answering your question. Tailpipe emissions.
You're not asking You're avoiding my question.
Okay.
My question was.
So one more, and then what I don't want to do is exclude other questions.
Try again. I'm very happy to.
If you drive all day, and that is driving across the borough time and time again, or 10,000 other cars driving across the borough at 3rd gear, at 20 miles an hour, are you using less or more fuel than you do in top gear at 30 miles an hour?
Well, I reject the notion because there isn't a. This is not. That is not a fair analysis of driving across this borough. That you were in a static 3rd gear versus a static 5th gear analysis.
You're a waste of time.
Colleagues of mine, I think we've had a number of us men have had a good go, and there is one lady who did indicate that she would like to contribute.
I cannot believe that you're perpetrating statistics which are so clearly
Can I just say on this? I'm being driven. Forgive the pun here, but I'm being driven by academic data, driven by independent third parties, and if you'll forgive me, most of the criticisms I've heard have been homebrewed statistics with no evidential basis.
Thank you. Firstly, I'm afraid it's difficult to hear when we don't have the mic. There are other questions, and Councillor Eamon has agreed to stay later on, so I will promise you we will come back to it. But there's a lady here and a gentleman there, and then I think out of courtesy to the rest of you who've come for other matters and councillors, it would be sensible to move on. I'm not going to cut you off. I promise you we'll come back to it. Madam, and then the gentleman at the back who was just putting his hand up, and then we will move on to the others. Dear lady, please, the floor is yours.
My name is Joan O'Byrne. I live on Ormond Drive. We all know that you can make statistics say anything you want them to say, and I've heard tonight a lot of comparison between 20 and 30 miles an hour as opposed to 2 and 5 kilometres, which is not like with like. And also that the money is already in place for this. So my query is this just a PR exercise, or is it a total compliment? And how transparent will the outcome be?
So the outcome will be very transparent. We'll publish the outcome of the consultation and our decision off the back of it. As I've made clear in previous meetings, well, a couple of things. First things first, we had in our manifesto as a party at the last local election, which we were very pleased to win, we had that we were going to implement this 20 MPH proposal. So there was an argument, it's not one that I was persuaded by, but there was an argument we could have just done this. We had a mandate, we were elected, we could have just done this. It's my feeling this is a significant enough change that we needed to speak to residents about it and hear their views. That's why we don't just ask, are you in favour, are you against? We ask about various different views, and we've given an opportunity for people to feed in comments as well. And we will consider all of those views before making a decision. If we don't use the money that we've had allocated for this, we will have to work darn quick to work out how we are going to use it or lose it. And there's fairly limited scope for doing so. What I just end by is saying, this isn't a PR exercise. Look, I've just mentioned, personally, right, I've got 3 children under 3 at home, which my wife is looking after now. I don't want a sympathy vote here, but would I choose to be out at 7 nights, 9 in total, doing this, facing many residents who have many different sceptical views on it, if I had any other choice? I think it's the right thing to do. I'm putting myself here, I'm hearing the arguments, I'm making a robust defence of the position. I think that's right.
Thank you, gentleman there, sir. Thank you. Right.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Thank you, that's better.
So Duncan Knox, Briar Close. I declare a professional interest in this. I work as Road Safety and Active Travel Team Manager for Surrey County Council and developed their speed limit policy that our elected members approved. So it's great watching this debate. It's good fun.
Maybe from where you're sat.
I'm very sympathetic personally to 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. They certainly support road safety, reduce the risk of collision, and in the right places, in residential areas and busy shopping streets, are clearly the right thing to do. However, I think I would have a concern over some of the major routes that you've got on your map and how you would successfully achieve a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. So let's take Hampton Court Road from here to Hampton Court and then through to Hampton Wick. You know, you've got a 30 section and a 40 section through there. There's no way people are going to stick to a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit when you just put signs up on their own. I think all the evidence shows that you get effective 20-mile-an-hour speed limits when the speed's already close to 20, or if you put in additional engineering supporting measures. So I just wondered if you could consider a compromise. A more effective solution would be just to tackle the residential roads and the busy shopping streets. I know it's going to be more expensive. You'll have lots more terminal speed limit signs. I accept that, but I still think it's probably the better way to go.
Okay, thank you.
Really useful set of interventions, and that's part of the reason that we're doing the consultation. That sort of feedback can inform what we do. So I've got a couple of observations on it, though, nonetheless. So the first is, if we do 20 mph as we propose, and there are some spots that don't comply, that we have problems with, we haven't said that we won't consider working with residents to come up with additional measures that would help compliance. So that's one thing. But I'm not saying absolutely that I reject the notion that there may be certain roads where we might consider changes. We have to see what the consultation shows. What I would say is to go back to the DFT data, where 20 mph has been implemented, the vast majority, and I mean the overwhelming majority, like for practically everybody, supports its retention. So the evidence shows that where you put it in, people want it and they support it because it does reduce speeds. Whether they reduce them enough is a separate question. The other point I just make about 20 mph and about our approach in sort of blanket terms versus sort of interventions in specific places is that I think if you look at the DFT report, and I recommend anybody who's interested in this before they respond, do have a look at the DFT report, because it's very multifaceted. It doesn't come to a clear, this is a bad idea, this is a good idea. But if you look at it, what you see is that the Brighton example, as one, not the only one, but Brighton did a blanket, and it did deliver. And actually there is a strong argument that actually having a consistency of speed limit across an area results in better compliance because you don't have the variability and people don't make independent determinations about whether or not it's right to be doing a certain speed on a certain road. They know Richmond Borough's 20 mph, they comply or don't, but they reduce their speed. And the other point I made earlier, I just make that psychological point, even for those drivers that are willing to exceed limits, most, and they have different risk appetites, but most have a risk threshold. So if it's 30, they might be willing to do 36 and feel that they can get away with it and that that's acceptable. If the limit's 20, I think fewer people feel that they're able to do 36. So they might instead think it's all right to do 28 or 30 or 32, but it does reduce speed. So we'll look at specific examples. If some highlight roads come up that we need to consider a different approach to, we may. I just made one last point, which is on the residential road approach. The reason we haven't gone down there isn't just purely a cost, 1.5 million versus 700,000. But it is this. Wandsworth did neighbouring borough, they did residential roads. My understanding is that the administration are now looking quite heavily at rolling out further, going on to more principal roads. So actually, if the direction of travel, as it seems to be, is when you implement these on residential roads, residents then say that they want more, I thought it was a false economy, honestly, to deploy it on residential roads at greater cost and then have an additional cost for further rollout. So I'm trying to make the argument from a standing start so that we get to where Wandsworth, frankly, in my opinion, will probably end up, but at much greater cost. So I'm trying to deliver a more cost-effective option for our residents.
Thank you very much. And I firstly thank you very much for the care in which you prepared your questions. Some of you prepared very carefully and have data which you've been kind enough. We're going to move on, sir, now. I do apologise. There's no point in having a vote, sir. It's a consultation. Sir, Councillor Samuel, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't want to enter into the debate this evening, and I'm glad that Councillor Amon says he wants the debate to be transparent. I would simply confirm something that he said to residents a few moments ago. He has put forward his views perfectly honourably as a fierce proponent of the scheme, and he's also referred, as have some members of the audience, to a 4-year study by the Department for Transport, which includes not just Atkins, as the Councillor mentioned, but a large number of academics as well, that comes to different views, both on modal links and on accidents and on speed. So residents have before them two approaches which differ, and I would urge residents who have listened very patiently this evening to Councillor Amon to study equally the Department for Transport, and in those cases where it differs from Councillor Amon, to make your own mind up which of the two you believe.
Thank you very much.
Chair, I have a question.
I'm going to do
Can I ask Councillor Samuel what his position is on the matter?
I do promise you we will come back to it if we could, but I do feel that other colleagues have raised other questions. I'm enormously grateful for the care in which people have prepared, and I'm grateful to you, Councillor Amon, for having listened and been offered to stay and see the data that other folk have. I think that's been very helpful. If people, even if you're not happy, we're going to move on the understanding that if there are issues we haven't raised, we will create time and we will come back to this. And councillors are open for this. A consultation is not just tonight. So if we can move now to our various questions that we have. Is Mr. Roger Archbold here, please? Sir, would you be kind enough to read your question? The microphone is there, and then a number of councillors may wish to respond, and you will guide the councillors on how you wish to do that, please. Mr. Archibald.
My name's Roger Archibald. I want to know, why is Hampton Rifle Club, based on the Thames waterland known as Hyde's Fields, shooting into an earth berm when the advice from their governing body, the NSRA, that's the National Small Bore Rifle Association, is to use sand bullet catchers and maintain them to prevent contamination of the land?
Yep. We ask our council leader to thank you.
Well, it's one of the delights of going out and knocking on doors, because I had the pleasure of discussing this with Mr. Archibald during the election campaign. The short answer is that they have the lease on the land, and they can. As you know, you've spoken with Vince, and he's written to the NSRA to ask them to try to force some sort of intervention with the Rifle Club, and they have written and made their view very clear. Unfortunately, there's no power of intervention. We can't march into the site and say, hey, look, now stop doing this. But hopefully, I mean, I will ask officers to look at it again to see whether they can, whether we can write to them and ask them to find a more sustainable and environmentally friendly way of doing things. But unfortunately, we simply don't have the powers of intervention that can force them to make change. One thing what will happen, of course, is that should at some point in the future there be a change of use on this land, this will be noted down in the planning notes as a contamination issue. So if there is to be a change of use on this land at some point in the future, it will need to be cleared up. And frankly, somebody's going to make a fortune, because there's all the decades of lead hanging around in the ground under there, so maybe we'll just go out and buy it ourselves. But yeah, so there is the opportunity for the council to take action should there be a change of use, but we'll certainly write to them and ask them if they would consider following the national body's guidance.
Thank you very much. Thank you for raising that. Can I now call on Morgan Fowles, please? Is Morgan here? Right, okay. Would people like to hear the question, or shall we move on? Move on, okay. Is the 30 seconds fine? Okay. These next three questions are linked, and they are, in actual fact, what we can do is take the three of them together because they raise very similar issues. So we'll have the three questions, and I will call on Lola Vapri, Georgia Valentine and Sarah Valentine to ask their questions, and then the councillors will respond. So is Lola here, please? Thank you. The mic's coming.
Now, we come from the businesses, local businesses here, and we have issues with break-ins.
Sorry to be a pain. Could you read the question that you set, please? Because there may be a discussion afterwards, and we'd rather have the question before the discussion. Thank you.
So, what is your plan to tackle the break-ins that is happening in Hampton Hill? What support are you giving to prevent this?
Thank you very much. And could I now call on Georgia, please? Thank you. Sorry not to have used your surname. I know Georgia. Sorry, apologise, Georgia.
So I'm a business owner on Hampton Hill High Street and also a director of Hampton Hill Business Association. We've had a spat of burglaries on the High Street targeting small businesses where just cash has been taken. The damage done to the businesses, loss of business while waiting for the police forensics teams, and the loopholes with insurance companies are costing all the small businesses dearly. We have approached the council as there are no cameras within our high street, and we do not seem to be getting any support in regards to this matter. Councillors were invited to a meeting at Positive Coffee previously about the matter, however they could not attend. We would like to know what the council is going to do to help us in regards to the matter. And I do know that this has affected Hampton as well quite severely.
Yeah, thank you.
And also, my mum's not able to attend this evening, so.
Oh, okay. Do you want to read her question then?
I think it was much on the same line.
It's much the same thing. Thank you very much indeed. Councillors also have the questions in front of them. Who would like to thank you. It starts with Hampton Hill. Councillor Carney.
Okay. Wasn't aware of I'm not sure who got the invitation to come for a coffee. I'm not the sort of person who declines invitations for cups of coffee, so I'm not sure about that one. But in terms of the break-in, I'm aware of the problem, and there's a police liaison meeting at the Roebuck pub on the 12th of December. I'm sure it's going to be a big item of discussion there. I'm also aware that the spate seems to have stopped as of a few weeks ago, or paused, and hopefully the police will give us some feedback on that, whether they think that they've scared the person away or caught them or something. They may tell us on the 12th. But fundamentally, it's a policing issue. As we all know, I hope we all know that the police resources have been cut back somewhat, and they are somewhat dependent on the level of crime in the area. So it's really important when you are a victim of crime to make sure you report it to the police and get one of their police reference numbers, because ultimately the level of policing we get does depend on the level of crime we get. And we do regularly liaise with the police. If there's some suggestion they can make to us as to a change we can make, then we're up for that. I've had vegetation cut back before where there's ambush points and things like that. Yeah, we will be talking further with the police.
Just wait for the mic, please, if you'd be kind enough, so that everyone can hear.
Unfortunately, the police are not in a situation where they can help us. Our local police officers in Hampton Hill have been fantastic. Did come to a meeting the other Friday with all business owners, and they provided as much support they can, along with a list of statistics which we can provide to you. They are pushing us to speak with councillors and see how you guys can help, whether we can have CCTV on our high street. We used to have, but you took it away, which is a big question in our eyes as to why we're now down to one camera, which is only for the council to provide a parking ticket to, which, unless you guys benefit in it, are not willing to help. But us small businesses, I know that in some cases on our high street, a lot of our businesses are struggling to keep going after this burglaries they've had. And that's not really a great way forward. We would like some assistance, whether there is a budget, to help us somewhere.
Yeah. Sorry, I understand that the possibility of redeployable CCTV could be considered, but in terms of permanent CCTV, I guess that's going to be a lot to do with budget constraints and so on. But I think we'd certainly like to raise and talk about it next week or at the police liaison group, where police will be present. So that would be a really good opportunity, perhaps. And maybe I didn't know that there was a meeting at Pause for Thought Cafe, but maybe we need, as councillors, to come and meet with businesses specifically on this this evening.
We're Councillor Roberts, and then we're
None can come in if you mention.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, you mentioned redeployables.
Could you just say who you are again, please?
I'm Norma Henning. I'm one of the business owners on Hampton Hill High Street, and my business got broken into recently. Can you just explain what redeployable CCTV means?
Sure. The council does have a portable CCTV thing. I've managed to get it in the past. We had a problem with the recycling site at the end of Windmill Road with fly tipping there. I managed to get the CCTV camera moved to there for a while. So there is a movable set that moves around the borough where there's particular problems that can be used for. And if that burglary, if the police requested us, then we could potentially use that for that.
Thank you very much.
As opposed to permanent CCTV.
Councillor Roberts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you entirely. I mean, our local police do a fantastic job. I'm not just saying that because there are two of them sat at the back of the room. But what we have to recognise is that we are getting fewer police officers as a result of cuts from City Hall over successive mayors. We now have a new superstructure at the top of our police, which is called a basic command unit, so that we are linked in with Merton, Wandsworth, Kingston and Richmond, so we have one borough commander for this huge area. I was at a meeting today up at London Councils which had Cressida Dick, the Commissioner, and Sophie Linden, the Mayor's representative for policing, and we were discussing issues such as the very paltry amount of money that we get for Crime Prevention Act funding from the Mayor of London. We get 0.6% of the overall budget in Richmond, and that equates to about £70,000. Kingston gets 0.9. We are seen very much as being a soft area for crime, and it's not that we are a soft area, but we don't have very high crime levels, but we do have a high perception of crime. And that is just as bad in my view. What we need to do is try to make sure that we can, we need to start taking some action ourselves, because we are not going to see the levels of policing rise again in the very near future. There is talk about a merit reset on the council tax in order to maybe fund some more policing. But we need to start looking more at our neighbourhood watch, our shop watch, encouraging local businesses to talk to each other more. In Hampton, our Traders Association have set themselves up with a very easy to use thing. It's the old WhatsApp, which they're all linked into now. So if there is somebody suspicious hanging around in the ward, in one of the shops, then they just send out a message and it goes straight to people's mobile phones, not to their emails, because not everybody is sat hunched over their keyboard all the time, but they soon get the ping and the message comes up. I mean, we also need to look at how we secure our own property. And you can find out lots and lots and lots of good advice from the police liaison group meetings, which will be advertised. You can go and ask the guys at the back, they'll be able to tell you when the next one's going to be. But we need to start looking more about how we can protect ourselves, because I'm afraid there is not going to be a big increase in police numbers coming our way, nor is the funding going to be there to do it. I will happily speak to whoever needs to be spoken to regarding the CCTV, but we have to recognise that CCTV is not necessarily the silver bullet. It's often poor quality, grainy images, and it doesn't really act as much of a deterrent, and it is only in one place, whereas crime is happening everywhere. Sorry that sounds a bit gloomy, folks, but there we go.
Councillor Peter.
Can I just come in on that, on the CCTV? I work in retail management. I work for a large company, international, not just an independent, and we've only just got CCTV into a Kidderminster store, and it's not the answer. The reality is, you have to call the police, and because of GDPR, you have a series of forms to fill in. The police want the details of the CCTV on hard disk burned for them to come and collect. But we actually have to submit forms and get it sent to the store, and for the forms we need the details of the investigating officer first, their job role, and where to email it to. We don't get it into store anymore. It's totally a back to front way of dealing with crime. It takes too long and it's not the answer. It ends up going down to insurance. What's more effective that some of the stores we have around other parts of the borough and other boroughs indeed, it's a radio link system, and local businesses who are independent and work together to deter crime could have one of those implemented. And that way you can speak to each other easily. And I agree with what Councillor Roberts said about WhatsApp. Using your phone, snapping a photo, sending it to someone, that's one way of doing it. But be careful with what you do with that because of GDPR.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll take a couple of questions to the floor, then I'm going to move on. Could you give your name? The microphone's just coming. Thank you. Thank you.
Carol Atkinson. I work a lot with the police as a Met volunteer. I am the Neighbourhood Watch representative for the borough, and hearing what Councillor Roberts has just said, we have got to do more ourselves and be more careful of our own property and so on. But any of you here who would like to join Neighbourhood Watch, and it's not curtain twitching, it's just being a good community member and knowing what's going on in your road. Do I understand the police are here somewhere or not?
Yes, they're at the back.
Yeah, that's right. Well, if you'd like to give your, don't worry about that, if you'd like to give your names to the police at the back with an email or a phone contact, I can contact you, send you information about Neighbourhood Watch, who your coordinator is in your road, or if you haven't got one, get someone to come and talk to you to set one up. The power is with us. There are fewer and fewer police. They're doing a fantastic job, but they can't do everything. We've got about 300 police and about 200,000 people in the borough, so we've got to put a lot of work into this. But please, please, do let the police know your contact details, and I'll contact every one of you.
Thank you very much for that. Seems that there are opportunities for consultation and ways forward. Thank you for raising it. Can I move on now, please? Can I call on Paul Adams? Is Paul Adams here, please? Mr. Paul Adams, sir.
We are currently trying to encourage more active and sustainable travel to St Mary's Hampton School, as there is limited parking provision and the 2 routes in become very congested at school drop-off and pick-up. However, despite having an active school travel plan, we are being severely hampered by very dangerous walking and cycling conditions on Oldfield Road from the railway bridge end on Priory Road, and a lack of any formal crossing at the Waitrose end of Oldfield Road, junction at Percy Road. Despite engaging with the council officers previously, it seems like the council are waiting for an accident to happen before justifying taking the action.
Thank you very much. Would you like to comment on that lovely little new school?
Go on then.
Thank you very much. Councillor Roberts.
Sorry, it's me again. I agree. I live just around the corner on Percy Road myself. I see that junction on a daily basis, and it is scary to cross. Unfortunately, what we have to do at times when there are, just the suggestion, let's put a crossing in there, we have to listen to what the officer's advice is. And unfortunately, that's quite a wide bell-mouth junction, and people do whack around it at a hell of a speed sometimes. And if and the sight lines aren't particularly good. So unfortunately, if officers say to us there is as much of a safety risk regarding putting a crossing there as not having one, we do have to listen to those officers when they're giving us that professional advice. On the road towards the school, again, we have to listen to their advice, and their advice to us here, and I've got it, is that Oldfield Road, engineers' advice, cannot be an approved road due to the road layout and proximity of other junctions and the crossing, and the width of the pavement near Oldfield Road, and particularly the bridge, also makes it difficult. But we do want to make sure that kids are getting to school safely. And again, I'm more than happy to come along and talk to you. I know that the previous administration were also there. I remember going out with Councillor Buckwell very early in the morning, and we stood there pointing at cars and trying to come up with some form of solution. But we'll keep working together, and hopefully we'll be able to get something done for you.
Thank you very much.
I was going to say, what about 20 mile an hour speed limit?
Yeah. I was
going to say something about 20 miles an hour down but I'm not going to. Thank you very much. Can I call on Amanda Durrance, please? Is Amanda here? Right, okay. Would anybody like to hear the question, or shall we move on? You'd like to hear the question, right? On behalf of Amanda Durrance, then I read her question. We should like to thank the Council for refusing permission on safety grounds to Hampton Prep School for a coach bay next to the main entrance to Carlisle Park. What progress have the Council's highways officers made in identifying an alternative place for the coach to drop off and pick up?
I'll come on somebody else.
Yeah, I think, which of you, dear colleagues, Derek, can we ask you if you'd be kind enough to introduce yourself?
I was just reading up on the football one, actually.
Oh, okay. Sorry. We're interested in the area around Carlisle Park, where there is the Hampton Prep, and how boys and girls can get on and off safely, and yet residents still get past in their cars. I think that's the issue.
It's one of these running battles, the relationship between users of Hampton Prep School and residents on Wensleydale Road and Wensleydale Gardens, and it's never good. It's just like chalk and cheese, I'm afraid. But the issue is unresolved. First and foremost, residents don't want a coach bay, and there are safety issues, and just whilst I'm here, just touching on Carlisle Park and Hampton Prep School, you may have heard a rumour going around in the village that there is that some moves are afoot to sell Carlisle Park so that Hampton Prep School can use it for their playing fields. No, there is no foundation, no truth, but I know that Hampton's a very gossipy place, and it's very easy for this to come up. So there is no, I can tell you here, you've heard it here, from the horse's mouth, no plans to sell Carlisle Park at all. Right, so we are considering plans for finding other places, and that will come as part of the school travel plan, and when further proposals are brought forward, we'll take a look at them and see whether residents buy into them.
Thank you. Can we move on now? Is Mr. Russell Clark here, please? Sir, the microphone is yours.
Thank you. I'm asking the question on behalf of Hampton Richmond Borough Football Club, and I guess, Geraint, you've got an interest here. I'm going to streamline the question slightly, specifically towards the playing fields up at Buckingham Road. What steps can the council do to ensure that the playing fields are maintained to a standard which is acceptable to County FA?
What I'm going to do, sir, if I may, is just to give councillors a moment's thinking time. Would you be good enough to read the question you put in as well? Would that be okay? It's just I'm covering to give them thinking time, lest you think I'm covering.
No, that's fine. So the question is on behalf of Hampton Richmond Borough Football Club, the youth section, who've been active in the community for around 30 years, playing matches at Kingsfield, in Hampton Wick, Bushy Park and Hampton Common. We've got 28 teams with over 300 players. However, in the last 2 months we've been hit by a double problem with regard to playing fixtures. Firstly, the County FA have stipulated that Hampton Common is presently unfit for use to host matches due to lack of facilities, i.e. toilets. They refuse to provide coverage for games there. The second issue, which is a bigger one, but probably not for this ward, is the playing fields at Kingsfield, which is Hampton Wick. The landlord there, which is Hampton Wick Cricket Club, have decided to terminate a lease there after 25 years in favour of another sports club due to a higher lease being offered, or higher ground rent being offered. So we've got an issue with housing matches.
Thank you. Councillor Thomason.
So this one on. So it's good that Question About Football comes to a lifelong rugby player. So that's very, very good. Well, I used to coach at Teddington Rugby Club, so I know the Bushy Park playing fields pretty well. So I know that it's really important for the football club, the youth football club, to have security of tenure of football pitches going forward. And I know there's a new rule from the Surrey League about provision of toilets has got in the way of that. I understand you're talking to Sport Richmond and want that to continue, but also through the council we'll look at the situation with the Royal Parks arrangement and the one you referred to see what we can do on that, because I appreciate that's a problem for you.
Sorry, just to take on from that, could a separate meeting be arranged between relevant parties and the other councillors? I don't love the meeting up here.
Did the rest of you hear? They're asking whether... Oh, you heard. Okay, it's fine.
Yeah, if we have a separate meeting at some stage at your leisure.
Yeah, I mean, I've already spoken to Russell about this. I was going to call out to the head of Royal Parks and have a word with him, whether we could find an alternative. And this thing about toilets, I need to contact the Surrey what they mean by toilets, and it would be possible to have these temporary ones put on for the weekends when you have the game playing. Yeah, that may work. Yeah, we'll see what they can do. Okay.
Can you bring the microphone to the gentleman at the front, please? Thank you.
Could I just make a point that, from my experience, that might help in this particular case? I do walk my dog, apart from Bushy Park, on Hampton Common, and my son one time used to play football in a different place there. The pitch isn't looked after at all. There's a great big dip where the goals hasn't been touched at all.
Bushy?
No, Hampton Common.
Hampton Common, yeah, no.
And the other point is that at the moment, there's somebody coming round collecting the rubbish from Hampton Common in a truck, driving it on at speed across the grass all over the place, doing wheelies behind the goalpost. And I have told the person he can't possibly do that, and if he wants any, I do have photographs of him and the van there. But the point is, that's tearing it up. Yeah. But there used to be toilets and changing facilities on Hampton Common, not exactly where the football pitch on the other side of the bushes, if you like, and it was pulled down because it was always being vandalised. I just thought people should know that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Councillors offered to come and work with the football club. Thank you very much. Sorry, I do apologise.
Hampton North, I mean, there is so many issues about Hampton North, and I've been working so hard on trying to get things going. I can't begin to tell you how frustrating it is, but I will do everything we can to make that football. And whoever is driving like that, we will find out who that is.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Councillor Martin.
Thank you. in Hampton Hill, depending on the distance you have to have these changing rooms away from where the pitches are, it might be worth having a chat with the Hampton Hill Cricket Club, because they've got facilities. They are at least a couple of 100 yards from the pitches by the Hampton Hill gate, so which may be too far from you. But if that's an acceptable distance to the Surrey people, then it might be worth having a chat with the Hampton Hill Cricket Club and looking at the it is. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Quiller.
One of our former councillors for Hampton North used to coach football, and he used to coach on Havelock Park, so that's another place to explore. There might be some facility option there. And we've also got the facility at the end of South Road, the RFC. I don't know if you've used that at all, or had a conversation with them to see if they can let you use the facility. I live right behind it, and it's not used every day because I hear when it's used.
Councillor Saunders.
Things might have changed somewhat, but I understood Kingsfield to be some kind of covenant of some sort, or arrangement that it should only be used for children youth sports. So I'm quite interested to know which club. I think something came out that it was going to Harlequins. Is that for adults or?
Yeah, no, kids.
Oh, for their kids. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Can I call now Penny Dunwell? Is Penny here, please? Penny, can we get a microphone to Penny Dunwell, please? And if you'd be kind enough to read your question, we'd be most grateful. Thank you.
Hampton North is a deprived area which just don't get any funding. The White House is home to the Community Association, and the YMCA manage the building for us, but they are having financial difficulties. We welcome people from all walks of life, including the vulnerable, elderly and the disabled. It houses a citizen's advice and food bank and a children's nursery. Since the 2nd of September, the boilers, which are obsolescent, were not working until 2 have been patched up, and the 3rd is no longer working, although I have been told today by the YMCA that they are able to put a part in which will be between £12,000 and £20,000, but it won't solve the problem because the boilers are dying. So they're all at risk of failure, and the association would be in severe difficulties as we would not be able to stay open in cold conditions. At present, if the boilers are on, the heat is excessive, and off, it is cold. With over 300 members, and many of them are deprived or elderly, and use the building to save on home heating expenses, this is a critical situation. We would request your help.
Thank you. May I begin by saying how enormously appreciative I am of the White House where we are this evening. This is a somewhat sensitive issue. The White House was opened many years ago when the idea of a community centre is that it should be a place that had rooms for hire. And the hirers basically are the trustees, who therefore like the idea of this being a place where they can hire rooms. The Community Association, which has got a 125-year unbreakable lease, got into real financial difficulties, even though it had generous support from the Hampton Fuel Allotment Charity. And as a result of that, they asked the YMCA to take over the management of it. And the idea of the YMCA is much more similar to our other properties, where outreach and going out into the community and taking a proactive view of creating things rather than simply being somewhere where you could hire rooms. It is obviously slightly different from that of the trustees. I hope you'll appreciate I'm being as tactful as I can in explaining the situation. There are only 2 or 3 ways forward. The one is that the trustees and the YMCA have to work together with an agreed approach, which is the modern one, to what a community centre would mean, and that may mean some changes. And that is absolutely essential, and equally the YMCA can't ask for what is unreasonable, and the trustees shouldn't obstruct what is reasonable. Equally, we've been asking for years for a degree of council support on this, and I'm sure that Councillor Roberts has heard what has been said, and I hope that he would have a word with his cabinet colleague who has the purse strings on this. But you're absolutely right to point out that the situation is now very critical and the future of this place is at risk. I'm sure that the Hampton Fuel Allotments charity, and we'll speak to a couple of our colleagues who are on that, will be sympathetic and supportive. But basically we need a shared vision of what this place is all about and what its future should be. And once we've got that, we're in a stronger position to go both to the council and to the Fuel Allotment Committee to get the funding that is so desperately needed. Kate and I have been supporters of the White House now for years. We're totally committed to it, and we'll do everything we can to give it the support that it needs.
We have a microphone for the gentleman at the back. Oh, you've got the mic. Yes, you, sir.
I'm Mike Payne. I'm actually the president of the White House, and I was involved with actually getting this building built, which I actually project managed in my own time. I was also at council meetings when I've asked for grants. The council used to give us a small grant, which used to help us with this. We were not in that financial difficulty that you mention, because as trustees, as volunteers, we were running this place for the benefit of the occupants in the area. I do take to heart some of your comments, Jeffrey Samuel, because you didn't support us when you could have done, and we asked for it, and the council didn't support us when I asked for it as well. I would ask that the council look at this, because we do provide with the YMCA, and I work closely with the YMCA, and we've actually done a survey around the area with the YMCA and Richmond, which most of you might have received, so we can actually look at working with the YMCA to go forward. But I would ask the council, because we are providing these facilities with the YMCA, I would ask that you do look to see if you can restore the grant which you used to give us, and you stopped giving us about 8 or 9 years ago.
Thank you.
I'm just going to agree with Mike Payne there. It's actually true that when Hampton upon Thames Community Association ran the White House themselves without the YMCA, they were running it away, they were breaking even with the support of Hampton. I've seen the accounts, Hampton Fuel Allotments. Since the YMCA have taken over, they've started running at a severe deficit. So unfortunately, we do need some support. That's why the boilers are in this situation now, and you've heard the cost of having the third one repaired. The plug-in heaters, which you might have seen in some of the other rooms here, not here, but some of the other rooms in this centre, which have been keeping the place warm. Trustees have been getting blankets out of their cars. That's not acceptable for a place that is home to lots of vulnerable people that might use it for the food bank. Citizens' Advice, as Penny Dunwell mentioned. I am working with the council already, and Councillor Jurians, the Assistant Cabinet Member for Community Equality in the voluntary sector, to have discussions alongside David White from Hampton Fuel Allotments, and hopefully we'll come to some sort of agreement. But I've recommended we consult the community on this. Some of you might have been aware of the White House consultation. It's now closed. A lot of respondents have come back to us, and it's clear that the use for the centre and the demand for it is not so much for the activities run by the YMCA, but those run by Hampton upon Thames Community Association. We do need funding to keep the place warm. We have also got a policy coming forward about keeping doors shut to keep the warmth in, and that covers shops and businesses across the borough. I've spoken to Councillor Acton about this. He's our councillor for business. And we can't have the doors open here in the winter and people freezing, and we can't have freezing air in here with no heating. So hopefully, I can see Councillor Wilson at the back, am I right? So hopefully he can hear this and see if there's something we can do to fund the White House going forward.
Okay. We're here, aren't we? And if it wasn't for the White House, this would have been difficult. Thank you very much for raising that. Thank you for raising those questions. And councillors, thank you. Did you want to come in, sir? Could we get the microphone to this gentleman, please?
chance of name. This is a totally irrelevant question, but can we know the charge levied onto the council for having all of these 11 meetings, please? How much does it cost to hire each location, please?
I'm not sure whether your mic was on, sir, and people at the back might not have heard.
The council heard me.
Okay. He's asking about the cost of all the consultation meetings. Councillor Ross.
Do you know, I don't have the exact figure to hand, but this is nothing new. We had the leaders' question time events, which went up and down the borough between 2010 to 2010 to 2018. Before that, we had the area consultation meetings, which used to meet on a regular basis. They had officer support, and they had the police were there. The thing is, we do have to try to keep these forms of conversations going. I know that there is an expense to them, but we have to try to keep these conversations going, because otherwise, we'll have exactly the same thing thrown back at us on the doorstep. Once every 4 years. Never see you. Where have you been? Oh, you only come round when you want our votes, don't you? We want to find out what people think, and these sorts of discussions are really good ways of finding out what people think. Some of it is unpalatable. This evening.
Chairman, can I refer you to my question? The total cost of hiring halls for 11 of these consultation meetings.
Councillor said.
What else happens?
The councillor said he doesn't have the figures.
Consultative meetings.
Yeah, the councillor says he doesn't have the figures, and I'm sure they will be available and could be got. It'll be the hire of the rooms, sir, because all the councillors here give their time for free.
Well, why couldn't you have said that sooner?
Because he wouldn't have known the price of the hire of the rooms. What I'd like to do, if I may,
I did say it.
Sorry, I do apologise. Sorry.
The hire of this hall tonight was £300.
There you go. Thank you.
I think if you're asking a question and we've got the answer, we'll give it to you.
Thank you.
So it's £300.
And did you? The gentleman didn't have the mic. The gentleman said the hire of this hall for an evening, sir, is £300.
What about the 8 hours?
We'll pursue that, thank you. We move now to a point where some people may have come and not had a chance to table their question. If you just raise a hand so I can see how many there are, because there's clearly people want to talk about 20 miles an hour, and Councillor Eamon has been kind enough to stay. But are there other questions that haven't been raised? If you could just so I know how many there are. There's 1, 2. Right, can we give 5 minutes, perhaps 3 minutes to each of you, and then give Councillor Eamon his time, and then can we allow a number of councillors for other meetings? We will make sure that they're able to could you give the mic to the lady there, please, and then the gentleman down here. Thank you. Again, reasonably slowly, so someone like me can write it down. Thank you.
Okay, my name's Kathy Driscoll. I just wanted to ask whether there's any news from, I know Councillor Roberts spoke with Royal Mail about the closure of the Hampton delivery office, and this is a real sort of worry for lots of people. I just wondered whether there's any news on that. I know that I got the feeling that it was a done deal pretty much from Royal Mail, but whether there's anything more that you're thinking of doing around that, or indeed if there's any sort of other provisions that could be put in place by Royal Mail to alleviate some of the problems.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know what this broader question is about, it's regarding the delivery office, which is situated in Rose Hill in Hampton. Unfortunately, the Royal Mail has taken the decision to, they would use Ponzi terms like rationalise their property portfolio. We would use terms like close it down. And the reason is that they say it is not fit for purpose, it is too small, and that they want to offer an enhanced service to customers. Now, their idea of an enhanced service is making you schlep all the way to Ashford if you've missed a collection. They are offering some additional things so that if you've missed a collection and you get that little slip through your door, you can go online. I know that not everybody has access to online or is comfortable using it, but they say that they can come up with some enhanced ways of making sure that you can get your delivery without the necessity to go all the way to Ashford. But we have asked them to look at, can we use the post offices? And they've said, unfortunately not, because there isn't insufficient space in either Hampton or Hampton Hill. Could we use Teddington as an alternative? And their claim is that Teddington is a very similar situation to Hampton, and it is too small, and probably their card is marked as well, I should imagine. We asked if we could offer a service at the libraries for example, and unfortunately they said that because of the security angle of keeping people's personal private mail and possessions, that wasn't a shot on the table either. So we have looked at, in many ways, all of the angles and trying to even using planning restrictions to say, look, you're not sitting on a gold mine at the side of Hampton Green. You will have to make sure that you are going to use this site either for commercial or business use, and if you can't get it for commercial or business use, you can do a shared use of residential and commercial. And even after all of that, if you cannot get around flogging it, and they would have to show a lot of marketing as well, by the way, before they get onto each of these sequential steps. Eventually, they would have to use it for affordable housing with off-street parking. So they aren't sitting on this little pot of gold that they can suddenly dip into, and no matter how many times we have spoken to them and said, can they change their mind, I'm afraid they're not willing to. So we are going to end up, I'm afraid, losing that facility, and we will keep talking to them to see if there is still any chance that they can find something a bit more convenient for local residents, so that they don't have to make that. I mean, it's 5 miles there and 5 miles back. It's a shocking journey. Lots of pollution. Yeah.
Can we bring the microphone? Oh, did you want to comment on that, sir? Yes. Can you give the microphone to the gentleman there, please? And then the microphone to the gentleman down here with the jacket.
Sorry, Kevin Rice, and I'm on the Hampton Society Planning Subgroup, and I'm curious, obviously probably related to that post office delivery sorting office, is the old police station in Station Road, which was bought and is still now sitting empty. Issues, I engaged in the local plan review, met the developers with Hampton Society hat. They were adamant, the council were very keen on 100% residential in that site, albeit that under the local plan it's still down for community uses. Obviously mostly done under the previous administration. I'm just curious whether there's an update on that and whether youth council can be more robust on the proposed uses for the site. For both sides.
I've heard nothing more about the site. I agree, it's looking like an eyesore at the moment. I wish they will get on with it. One of the problems that we have when we're dealing with national planning law is that once planning permission has been granted, even if they were to go in and do a very, very, very small amount of work on the site, it would then class as work having been commenced and in keeping with their obligations and duties as developers of the site. I would like to see there being more there for community use, but it's been bought by a developer, and as I said, they're going to try to maximise the full whack of housing out of it as much as possible.
I'm going to move on if I may, because I do want to get your questions,
yes,
sir.
Hello.
Name, please.
Steve Cunningham, I live in former close in Hampton. I'd like to ask about the 20-mile-an-hour consultation, please.
We'll come to that in a minute. I'll give you first bid when we get back to the 20 mile an hour. But you will be first bid, I promise. You had a different question on a different topic, or we're back on 20 mile an hour, sir?
One on 20 mile, I just thought I might add something to
well, yes. Briefly, if you could, please.
The delivery. Yeah. Hello, good evening all. My name is Samdar Narayan. I live on Courtlands Avenue. I used to know the Dillon shop at the junction of the Percy Road and I think it's Broadway. Yeah. They used to have a secure cage where, say, not Royal Mail, but other Amazon type of parcels used to be dropped by that. I wonder whether Royal Mail might consider using that, because they're quite equivalent for this purpose.
I will happily suggest it to them, but I fear that their mind is very much made up.
No. Their mind is made up about closure of roads. However, offering a nearby facility for residents who don't have to trek 5 miles back, they might be open for that suggestion.
I will put it to them.
Thank you very much. Can we go back to the gentleman there, and we're going to start again, Councillor Eamon. Colleagues, okay, is that okay? Now your question about 20 miles, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. So, two questions. What is the time frame, and is there a review process?
So the consultation has been a 3-month consultation, which is about as long as a reasonable consultation should be conducted. It concludes on the 21st of December.
Can you hear it back, or are you?
It's on.
Right, that's better. So,
so it's a 3-month consultation. It concludes on the 21st of December. And given that obviously that takes us into the Christmas period, there'll be a bit of time before we've had an opportunity to input all of the manual responses, because there's written forms that need to be input into the system before we can review what the outcomes were, look in detail at what the responses were that were made, form a view within the council and come forward with our proposal on how we plan to take things forward on the back of the consultation, and we'll make very clear what the responses were and how we plan to move forward from that.
Will there be a review process?
So if we move ahead, because the presumption hasn't got to be that we will, if we move ahead, because we've undertaken studies on the road network about speeds, we will have the ability to look at what impact 20 mph has had in relation to those speeds as well. So there will be an evaluation. At this stage, and we haven't consulted on the basis of some period of time at which we will review and decide whether or not to rescind or keep on the measure. It will be an evaluation and subject to public transparency. So clearly, if it doesn't deliver the outcomes, people will be able to make representations about that. But I have full confidence that if we go ahead, given that so many local authorities have done this, that it's pretty clear what the outcomes will be in this area.
Thank you.
Hello again. I do commend Councillor Eamon for the passion with which he has spoken about the 20 mile per hour zone. I do commend you, sir. I would also request yourselves, your honourable selves, to be objective about it. You have a view, and the Department of Transport has come up with a view, a macro view. I would humbly request yourselves to be objective, to look at that, and probably, I do not know whether you'll be able to distribute that report or its excerpts, but at least put it up on your website, and also allow the people, as part of this consultation, to have a balanced view of it. If you would allow me to finish. Sorry, I do commend your passion, but let us try to be objective about it, to get a balanced view. And the fact that, I do also commend the fact that you've got the money from TFL, but it doesn't mean you've got to spend it on something which isn't beneficial. It can be returned.
So let me answer. So the second one, I wouldn't, honestly, a hand on heart, I would not be proposing spending on something that wasn't efficacious. It does have to, however, meet Transport for London's priorities. So we can't do things that Transport for London don't find useful with that sum of money. In terms of the document, look, the DFT document is just another contribution to the debate. And what I would say is, if you're interested in the subject, read it. I make no bones about it. It's publicly available. I mean, just to point it out, in that document, you'll find figures like only 12% support amongst residents in 20 mph limit areas for going back to 30. You'll find that actually net speeds in residential are reduced by 0.7 mph. You'll find the Brighton Phase 1 showed a significant reduction in overall collisions, -18%. On journey times, which have been raised, the DFT report says journey times increased by 3% in residential areas and 5% in city centre areas. So read the DFT report, because you will get a balanced view. You will not get a complete defamation of 20 mph. Please do read it.
I will do that. And just like you are dismissive of people who handed statistics to you, so in the same way, I'm unable to absorb it at this moment.
But what I would say is this: when we did the very first of these events, I didn't have a presentation. I came along and I took questions. And I responded with the evidence that I had to hand. And there was a very strong feeling, oh, this isn't enough. Residents wanted more of a presentation on our thinking. So we've done that, and we've got the slides and the data that supports it. So to some degree, I accept the point that you may not feel that the data presented, not in your case, sir, but some people may not feel, it presents their worldview. But the problem is, we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. If we don't produce enough data, we're told off. If we produce too much, we're biased. It's an impossible situation.
Take an objective view.
Excuse me, we're going to move on, so if we may. Was there a lady there that wished to make a contribution? Thank you.
My name's Bonnie Green. I live on Hampton Court Road. It's more of an observation rather than a question. Yeah. I was looking at your poster back there, detailing where all the accidents have happened, whether they're light, middle, or fatal. 3 fatal accidents there, but one of those on Hampton Court Road is not a fatal accident as a result of a car collision. It was actually a murder where someone was pushed in front of a car, so that can't be described as an accident.
Well, it will be recorded as a road traffic accident.
Yes, but it's not. It was not a road traffic.
Well, I can tell you for a fact that if the car was going slower, the chances are that person would have survived.
I don't think so. He was pushed.
Well, forgive me. There is a material impact of speed on.
No, but that was not due. Anyway, but also there are a lot of low risk accidents on Hampton Court Road. We see lots of them, and the majority of them happen when the traffic is going slow.
Yeah.
Because they go slow, because they're looking at the deer, they're looking at the river, and the majority of the accidents on Hampton Court Road are when the traffic is slow.
Yeah, those observations may well be right in those specific.
Well, I think, yes,
but they may be right in those specific areas. But there are two factors that relate to speed that are important in relation to road safety. The first is the slower your speed, the more time as a driver you have to respond to an emerging accident situation. So you lessen the chance of accidents. That's why every 1 mph reduction in speed on average results in the 5% reduction in accidents. And where an accident happens, lower speeds result in less serious incidents.
I just think that information should
what
have
I'd
a bit
like
more.
to do, I think, if I may, is allow people from the floor to make their comments, but if you'd be kind enough to accept that councillors won't be able to respond, but you will have had a chance to say your piece. The councillors will listen, I promise. There's a lady there, I think, just there, and then there's a gentleman at the back, and I'm trying to find people who haven't had a chance to speak already.
If it does happen, and I rather hope it does actually, I just wondered if in the future there's any chance that you're going to, because you won't be able to speed hump the entire borough, are you going to take away any of the speed humps? I'm specifically thinking of Oak Avenue, which are very vicious, even if you're a pedestrian or a cyclist. They're just very unwieldy.
Quick answer to that is, while you're just getting the next question, is we'll look at it, but it's really difficult, I have to be honest, to remove them, because you have to prove that when you're removing it, you're not going to have a damaging impact on road safety, because the cost of removing something and then reinstating it is vast. So we'll try, but we really have to be sure that in removing it, we're not going to have an adverse impact on safety on road.
Lady, very back.
Can you hear me? Is that held right?
Yes, fine, thank you.
I'd just like to say that what I'm not concerned about very much is a 20-mile-per-hour limit. I think it will make very little difference in a huge scale. What I am concerned about is the misuse and the misleading use of data. When that page number 5 went up, it was very easy to see that the two figures, as somebody over here explained it at the time, were transposed. Now, I've made a lot of public presentations in my time, and I always check other people's figures. And you said, well, when you give it... But it's not that simple as such to see on the page wrong. There are a lot of other bits of data that have not been presented objectively.
Well, okay, I don't accept that. So look, the figures that were noted as being incorrect, the figures that were noted... Let me respond to the point.
Sorry, I thought you had... I think we're going to move on because I've got 1 minute and I want to give a vote of thanks. Sir, you're our final speaker tonight.
Okay, I just want to sum up tonight, actually. I'm actually in favour of the 20-mile-an-hour limit, and I'm also a convert because I do actually drive a hybrid, and every time I drive in Richmond Borough, I'm actually doing on battery, so it actually works for me completely. However, you said before you're a fierce proponent. I would say tonight you're too fierce. Tonight I came here to hear your presentation, and I had read all the documentation on the website, so I'd seen it and I wanted to hear the main points. I then wanted to hear everybody else's view, so there can be a balanced view about it. I'm afraid tonight you were attacking people, and I'll use that word. You are using a very biased view. If you're putting this forward as a council, I would prefer a much better, cleaner view, a balanced view about the pros and cons. Not every time someone's trying to speak, trying to say your personal view, put them down, try and say that their information was incorrect. So unfortunately tonight you've come away very biased, and I'm saying this as a president of this community association who have actually hosted this event, and I'd prefer a balanced view so the councillors could have heard what the residents really thought, rather than you trying to answer every single point with facts and seeing some of your views which were clearly your facts were wrong, as pointed out by 2 or 3 people. And I don't think you should be putting down a lot of the people who have spoken tonight.
That's not my intention, sir. And that's
It may not be, but that is what you have done, sir.
it's not. And if I may be allowed to respond on that. Look, we wouldn't have these community conversations. We didn't need to have them. We didn't have to have a consultation.
Yeah, but you don't have to be so fierce.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Can I explain?
It's 9 o'clock. A number of us can stay a few minutes, but before we do, would the councillors like to say anything before I actually thank you for coming?
Could I please respond?
Of course, sir. Can I say a big thank you on our behalf for the councillors coming this evening? I really appreciate that. And can I thank you for your care and passion about what we're doing in our community. Councillor Ellen has come and he just wants to make a couple of comments, but it is 9 o'clock. When he has, and I've said thank you, I wish you a safe, slow journey home.
So look,
John, can we just thank you for sharing
I'm
this?
very sorry. I'm very sorry if that's your perception. That's certainly not my intention. The point I make is that this council does have a view about what it wishes to see implemented, and we do want to make that argument. We haven't come agnostic to this, and frankly, if I just stood up here and said, yes, your arguments are right, yes, your arguments are right, yes, your arguments are right, there'd be no point in this dialogue. We have a view. I am persuaded by the data, and I have to say, I really do have to say this, there is a concerted effort by a significant group of people in the borough to be anti this measure, and they are putting about falsehoods and concocted figures to confuse people. These figures are solid and robust.
I think thank you. I declare the meeting closed, and thank you all for your attendance. You'll find it's 9 o'clock. Thank you.